Okay, welcome. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Glad to see you all. My name is Mia. I am a member of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group, and I am a resident in Ward 3 near Lee Park. And we are having our second conversation with Mr. Wally Langfellow, our Robbinsdale mayoral candidate. Thank you, Wally, for speaking with us again today. The intention of this meeting is to continue our conversation about racial justice and equity issues as they pertain to our elected officials ahead of our general election on November 3rd. So members of the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group have come up with a few more questions, and we presented these questions to Mr. Langfellow a few days ago. And we are here to listen and become better informed voters. And for those of us who are white members of the community, we are here to be better allies to our neighbors who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day, by the way. So we will allow space for follow-up questions from the audience at the end. And as always, white people will defer and listen to BIPOC members when they have something to say. So this meeting is recorded and will be posted with our previous candidate conversations. If you'd like to view our first conversation with Wally, you can search R4RJ, R4RJ on YouTube, and you'll see the channel with all of our conversations from before. And we will keep audience microphones off for the time being, but you are more than welcome to put questions in the chat, keep your cameras on. It's nice to connect with faces. So we'll try to keep our meeting to about 45 minutes, and we will invite Wally to give us a little introduction, and then I'll jump into our questions, and we should have time at the end so we can open it up to follow-up questions from this group. We will try to wrap up right before 7:45, maybe a bit later, to give us enough time, and Wally then can tell us how to get in touch with him if there are further questions. Okay, so again, Wally, thank you so much for being here. Would you mind giving us a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure, thanks, Mia. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your group again tonight. So I have lived in Robbinsdale for 35 years now, over 35 years. We rented for the first 5 years, and my wife and I bought the house that we currently live in 1990. It was part of the Robbinsdale Economic Development Authority Scattered Site Program, where they knocked down a deteriorating home and replaced it with a new home. And we bought that in 1990. There is a similar project that exists now, but the city does not get involved with the actual building of the home like they did back when we bought our home. And to that end, actually, that's one of the things, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but that's one of the things I would like to see if the city can get involved again, because I think it's really important to have affordable housing in Robbinsdale. I think that that's a key element that has made Robbinsdale such a strong community. Affordable housing for young families and families who can't afford the McMansions, as I call them, to move into our community and to be part of what we have in Robbinsdale is a great diverse community. And I just think that it's really important. I hate to tell you what we paid for our house back in 1990. You'll cringe. It was below 100,000, well below. So, and we're in a great home. We love it. It was built by the North Hennepin Tech crew, and the city. The students were managed by professionals, but we love where we are, and we've been here 30 years. So that's just a brief intro. I am a business owner. I own Minnesota Score Magazine. It's a sports magazine. I also do high school sports on the radio, and I've been doing that now for the last 26 years. I'm in the media, so to speak. I'm a sports media person, and my volunteer work. I've coached baseball and basketball in Robbinsdale for since the 2000s. And going back before that in other communities. I started a program in 2009 for kids from Cooper and Armstrong who do not make the high school varsity team or do not make the high school teams to come and play on our team. And it's basically it's the Robbinsdale Robins traveling team. And we serve a lot of African-American families. I would say well over 50% of the kids who played in our program over the years. And we've had over 500 kids now. And I still coach it and I still run it. My kids haven't been in it since 2016. So I'm proud of that program. In the mid-2000s, I started a program with former twin Torrey Hunter. We brought kids, his objective was to bring African Americans into the game of baseball, and he helped us in that way in providing scholarships for players. We literally, I went door knocking in North Minneapolis as we expanded our territory for kids to play Robbinsdale Little League Baseball. So we were bringing kids of color into Robbinsdale to play Little League Baseball. And we started that back in 2007. And then in 2010, when my kids left Little League, a friend of mine had been over in West Africa. And he had been there on an eyeglass mission, and he came back and said, we're going to bring baseball to Benin, West Africa. And so my reach goes beyond our borders, well beyond our borders in serving an African country that is very much in need. They're a third world nation, one of the poorest nations on the planet. We have, in that time of 10 years, we have brought 2 groups of kids here, one in 2016, one in 2018. They stayed at the United Church of Christ back behind the church that's located. T. Michael Rock is the pastor, located right behind Robbins Center. And so I've been involved with that. We brought, as I said, 24 kids in those two different years, and an opportunity. And we've been sending equipment, and we have scholarships for kids who, when you're in Benin, you have to pay to go to public school. And I didn't find this out until one day one of the coaches there called me or emailed me and said, I asked how the kids are doing in school. And he said, well, several of them are not in school. And I said, why? He said, well, they can't afford it. And I said, well, what does it cost? And he said, $150. And I said, $150 a week, a month? He said, no, for the whole school year. So we now provide scholarships for these kids. If they are in our baseball program, we pay for them to get into school in Benin, West Africa. And so it's been a really gratifying, project to be involved with. And so, like I said, and bringing them to Robbinsdale was really neat too, because we got an opportunity to see these kids interact with the kids from Minnesota, not just Robbinsdale kids, but kids from all over the Twin Cities, because we do this tournament every year that benefits them. So they played in the tournament that benefits them. And I know I spoke to this a little bit earlier, but just as an intro to give you an idea of what I do and where I've been. So I'll leave it at that, and we can start with the questions now, because I can talk baseball all day.
You know what? It's great when you have those passions that you're ready to talk about. I think that's wonderful. So thank you for that introduction. So as we mentioned, this group has questions around 6 topics that this group has submitted and organized in advance. Again, for transparency's sake, these same questions are asked in the same order to any other candidates who meet with our group. And we have plenty of time per question for this round. So if it's okay with you, Wally, feel free to elaborate as you like. And then for any answers that exceed, let's say like 5 minutes or so, I may just give you a little wave and ask you to wrap up that answer so we can have enough time for questions at the end. Okay? Okay, great. So our first question, the amount of unchecked power held by the city manager is alarming to many members of Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group and is directly related to racial inequity in Robbinsdale. What are your thoughts on Robbinsdale's current government structure? And do you have any adjustments you'd like to see to work toward equity for BIPOC? And what are they?
Well, so I gather by the question that folks feel like there is some racial inequity with regard to the city manager. And so from that standpoint, I can't speak directly, but I can speak to what I think are, as you currently point out the current government structure. And I'm a little bit alarmed by it. I've talked about this actually when I've been knocking on doors in Robbinsdale. The way I see our government structure, the way it is and the way I think it should be, is it looks to me like the city manager basically comes up with policy. The city council then reviews it and or talks about it and then eventually votes on it. In my mind, city government policy should start with city council and the mayor, and they should dictate policy based on their discussions with residents. So if I'm a city councilman or I'm the mayor, you should be out talking to people, knocking on doors, finding out what their concerns are. Literally, that's what I do, right? That's what I've been doing since June, is knocking on doors and asking people what their concerns are. Then you form policy, you go to city council and you form policy based on those discussions that you are having with residents. That policy should then be implemented by the city manager, not dictated by the city manager. And those are, to me, that is, and I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but I've had people tell me that they're frustrated by the words, "I'll take care of that," that comes from the city manager when there are, things that, we need to do this before we move on. And then the city manager pipes in at a city council meeting saying, "I'll take care of that." Well, I think that it should really, the city council should be dictating what happens and the city manager should implement those policies. And if the policies, if folks feel like the policies are coming from the city manager that are not racially sensitive, then absolutely. And the other thing that I would like to see with regard to that position is, I think it would really benefit Robbinsdale if our city manager lived in the city of Robbinsdale. I just think that, for that matter, I'd love to have, when we were hiring police, it'd be great if they lived in the city of Robbinsdale. A friend of mine I went to high school with, his dad was on city council and was a Robbinsdale policeman, and they lived in Robbinsdale. Now this is 40 years ago, but and maybe we were more small town then, but I don't know. I think that we still have a good community, strong community here, where strong community feel where we could have that happen. And obviously you have to look beyond your borders for things. I'm not suggesting we close the borders, but I am suggesting that I think that this could be an important piece to us moving forward and being more racially sensitive and being more, more aware of the diversity that we have. So that's my feeling and thoughts. I think I've seen it on a few large issues in the past, and I think that it would really help us if that was reversed. If city council seemed to dictate policy more than coming from the city manager's position.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Okay, our next question. When discussing racial equity, it's also important to think about the intersection of Black and Brown lives and the lives of the LGBTQ community. Would you support flying a pride flag at City Hall or on the light posts downtown? And by the way, this question has many parts. Would you support flying a Black Lives Matter flag? If you don't agree with the Black Lives Matter flag or banner, would you support a Blue Lives Matter flag, and why? And then finally, how would you respond to criticism from residents regarding this?
So this is a tough question. I got to be honest. Of all the questions that that I came across, this is the one that I struggled with the most. But at the same time, I feel like I think that there are better ways to resonate diversity and being inclusive than flying a flag. My biggest concern would be, where do we draw the line, and who do we tell that they can't fly a flag? at City Hall or on the light post, which is the city, of course, dictates. That's my biggest difficulty was, and I'm wondering what impact long-term those would have. I would like to see us work on things that have more impact, immediate impact, diversity in our staff. Let's work on having more diverse city staff. Let's work on having a more diverse police department. I think that those things are just more, that will have a bigger impact on the community. I went to the police forum for the new police chief a week ago, Tuesday, I believe it was. I think it was a week ago. And they had the current interim police chief, Captain Foley, who is the interim, and then they had the gentleman from Columbia Heights. And to me, listening to both of them, and one of them in particular, I thought that the gentleman from Columbia Heights mentioned that his outreach, they brought in, he's got a very diverse police department now, and he said it has helped them tremendously in dealing in those communities. I can't remember, it was an African community that lives within Columbia Heights, and Columbia Heights is very similar to Robbinsdale. It borders Minneapolis, they're diverse, and he talked about the fact that they have hired, I think it's Somalian. I think I'm right in saying it's Somalian. I might be mistaken, but it was an African community within Columbia Heights, and he talked about how important it was to have a Somalian officer on his staff and how they communicate so much easier with that community. So I do think that it's important to make adjustments as a city, but let's do things that I think have an immediate impact. Sorry, I just bumped my laptop there. For instance, the hiring within the police department, seeking more businesses that are owned by African American ownership, or more minority ownership within the city around. I think that those things will have a bigger and better impact. And again, I'll answer the question in saying I just don't know where we would be able to draw the line at people who would want to fly flags in Robbinsdale, and I wouldn't want to include or not include somebody and turn that into a fight that we really could be spending our time doing things that would make a bigger impact.
Sure. Okay, good, thank you. All right, our next question. So we as a group acknowledge that racism is systemic in our nation and in our city. What particular systems in Robbinsdale strike you as underserving, or perhaps even actively harming our BIPOC community? And what thoughts or plans do you propose to address them?
So the first thing that came to mind when I read the question, and I think that sometimes the first thing that comes to your mind is always your best answer. And it's a great question too. I think that because we have what, 3 or 4, I think, police right now that we need to hire. I think we're 3 or 4 short right now. Let's put our money where our mouth is and look for discrepancies in city policy that initiates where the issues lie, and work with the Human Rights Commission and work with community members to determine our next steps. One of the steps could be naming a public health crisis. Name racism as a public health crisis. That from there, you can institute a goal for the first year to address that and those issues. And just the hiring. I just think that if we look at hiring as one of the places where we can move forward, I talked about, if you listen to the Channel 12 debates the CCX debates that I did, I talked about creating a police task force. So let's do this. Let's get a headhunter in here, or an outside group come in here and say, okay, here are the problems in where you're hiring and the way that you're currently doing things. Okay. And once we have done that, then we could form a police task force that looks at, training and beyond training, what our hiring practices are. And I think if we take those things and literally, like I said, put our money where our mouth is. We're talking about wanting to be more diverse, and we're talking about wanting to be more racially sensitive. Let's do it. Let's get some headhunters here and say, okay, this is what you're not doing. This is what you are doing. They look at the city charter. So I just think that it is an opportunity within our hiring practices and within our city charter to flush those things out. That's my thought process.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so our next question, what are the community, governmental, and logistical obstacles that you anticipate having when working towards racial equity?
Well, I mean, the simple answer to that is, and I had a partner in my business when I first started back in 1994, and he was doing sales, and I was basically administration and doing everything else. And I would come to him sometimes and say, hey, our sales are really down. And he'd turn to me and he'd say, I'm one guy. And that's kind of my answer here. And my first thought was, I'm one person on city council. Now I have the bully pulpit of being the mayor. So from that, I think it would be my job to educate my colleagues on the advantages of having a more diverse Robbinsdale city staff and more diverse, opportunities, and bring in more businesses that are owned by, minorities. And so I just think that that's going to be my job. But the problem is, again, I'm one guy, so I only have one vote. So what I need to do, and what we're going to need to do, is to make sure that my colleagues on city council will understand the importance of what we're talking about here.
Great, thank you. Okay, on to our next question. What is your vision or plan for the city to do more to support minority-owned businesses? And how would you, as mayor, recruit, encourage, and provide support for Black business owners looking to open in or relocate to Robbinsdale?
Well, in my business, and I'll just point to, this is who I am. I have one of my lead photographers for Minnesota Score magazine is an African-American woman. One of my partners on one of the radio shows I do is Larry McKenzie. He's an African-American leader in the North Minneapolis. He's also the head basketball coach at Minneapolis North High School. I think that we need to look at the businesses and the business owners that we have, talk to them directly, and find out what difficulties they've had in Robbinsdale or what positives they've had in Robbinsdale. So let's talk to the owners of these businesses, and they perhaps could lead us to other minority owners, or they could be encouraging to other minority owners to come in and say, hey, this is a good place for you to do business. Have their experiences been good or bad? Let's find out. If they're bad, let's see if we can correct them. If they're good, let's use those as a launching point to bring more people in. Figure out a plan, recruit more business owners, go outside of our boundaries to look for these folks. You can't just, and this is part of the hiring process that I think sometimes we have an issue with in Robbinsdale, and why we don't have a more diverse staff is, I think, we follow all the rules. We put jobs up on the internet, on the job sites and so on, but sometimes it takes more than that. You need to look at places where people of color are, where are they going to find jobs? Where are they looking? What websites are they looking at? What job and information areas are there? Are there headhunters that are out there that we haven't talked to before? Are there job recruiters that we have not dealt with in the past that tend to have more African Americans and more people of color involved? it's not that hard. We have to make that extra effort. It's not just, it's not good enough right now, in my mind, to simply put your job up on a website and take whoever comes in. I think you have to actively recruit. It's the same issue with, and it's easy for me because this is what we have to do. This is what I had to do in Little League for baseball. When I taught, when we came in and we're trying to bring African-American kids in, we can't just put it out there and just run it up on the internet and say, here, come play baseball in Robbinsdale. You have to go talk to these people. You have to literally reach out and make that extra effort. And, you know, I think that we have an opportunity to do that. I think that it would be wonderful to have more options for minority owners in Robbinsdale. And I think if we make that extra effort, we can make it happen for sure.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have one more prepared question for you, and then we'll open it up to questions from the group. So I'll just take the chance to remind the audience, if you have follow-up questions as we're talking, feel free to plug them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll be able to open up your microphones a little bit later. But Wally, we have another question for you here. So how would you leverage your role as mayor to foster a more racially just Robbinsdale?
Well, this is easy. Honestly, make myself more available. And I don't mean, you know, one-off events. I'm talking about proactive outreach. So that means going into neighborhoods, and it does mean going into neighborhoods. This is what I'm doing. I literally knocking on doors. That's what I do. And I have been for the last 3 or 4 months now. Literally, we have knocked on, me and my wife and my dad and some friends as well, but mostly me and my wife. We have knocked on over 8,000, closing in on 9,000 doors now in Robbinsdale.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
wow.
But you know what? It's educational. And there's no way that you can do this job. And look, if I win, I have to know what people are thinking. If I lose, I've enjoyed meeting a lot of really good people, and I've learned a lot about the city of Robbinsdale. I thought I knew it all. I was wrong. No, I know a lot about Robbinsdale, but finding, you know, talking to people and hearing their concerns and finding how, you know, how the different demographics that we have in our city now. And I've been really happy to do it, and it's been a great experience. And win or lose, I'm going to walk away with this thinking that it was a good educational experience. But particularly if I win, I've got a good handle on what people are thinking about. And truthfully, a lot of people aren't engaged. And so hopefully this will get them more engaged. The fact that I came to the door, I don't know how many people have told me, you're the first candidate to ever come to my door of any kind, specifically mayoral. And so I'm happy to do it. Again, I had a good day today. You guys cut me short. I go till sundown. I had to get back here by 7 o'clock tonight. So.
I know, it was such a nice day, wasn't it?
Oh, it was gorgeous. But my wife is a trooper. She was still out there when I left her at about 6:30. So, but I just think that that's important. And I think that, you know, again, having the bully pulpit of being the mayor is going to be important. Look at my, and I'm not, I don't want to take away from anything that Bill has done. You know, God bless him for serving for 40 years on city council. But this is who I am. I've been involved with an African American community, with my coaching and with my volunteer work for years. This is not, I'm not going to change who I am. If you want to know what I'm going to do, look at what I've done as far as that goes. I'm not coming to the table now because I'm a mayor or I'm running for mayor. I'm coming to the table with what I've done in the past and who I will be going forward. I will continue to coach. I will continue to run the Robbinsdale basketball program. I will continue to do my work with our Benin West Africa program. I did it. We ran the tournament last in August. We had half as many teams as we had in the past, but I will continue to do that. And that's the best way for me to answer this. Is the difficulty is going to be moving people because I'm only one person, but I think that I could help convince people. And I think that that's the way we need to go.
That's great. Thank you. I know this group has that in common with you. We're looking for more engagement within the community too. So we can appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. So we have now covered all of the questions that this group has prepared for you in advance, and we have time for audience questions.
Great.
So once again to the group, if you have questions, I see one in the chat from Nick so far. Anyone else, go ahead, type them in the chat. I'll take a look at cameras in just a moment to see if you'd prefer me to open your microphone, and you can ask that way too. I'll start with Nick's question in the chat here. Nick asks, so when our group is calling for more accountability through policy for our police officers who don't live in Robbinsdale, and Robbinsdale residents say, I'm assuming other Robbinsdale residents say, this message is divisive to our community, what's your take on it?
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Sure, if you'd like to read it, I know there are a couple parts to it. So if you click on the chat button on your screen, Wally, you'll be able to see the questions coming in. So this one is from Nick.
Okay,
he asked it earlier. So when our group is calling for more accountability through policy for our police officers, oh, Nick, do you want to clarify? I saw you came off mute.
Let me clarify this. Hey,
Yeah,
so when I say this group, I just mean the R4IJ. When we're asking for accountability through policies for our police department, who, as I understand it, I don't think any of the police officers actually live in Robbinsdale, right? So that's kind of the core to this question is these are individuals that don't actually live in Robbinsdale. And there are Robbinsdale residents that say that message is divisive to our community as Robbinsdale's residents, that we want to hold police officers accountable through policies for our community. And I'm just wondering with that message, that kind of counter message to us wanting accountability to police officers, what is your take on it?
Well, I mean, I think the accountability goes across the spectrum, whether they live here or not. I mean, I don't think we can treat officers who happen to live here differently. I think it's important, as you heard me talk about earlier, that'd be great if we had officers who live in Robbinsdale. My answer about the guy that was on city council and was a police officer, I mean, that was a win-win. Here's somebody who was really engaged and, part of the community. But, that having been said, does it become more tricky when they're living outside of Robbinsdale is basically the theme of this question I get. And yeah, I would say it probably is. As far as the accountability, what policies can we push forward? Boy, I don't know. I'll be honest and say I think transparency, and no matter whether they live here or not, is important. I've talked about, and the transparency part I've talked about goes, and I'm really specific with my suggestions on transparency. One of them was literally having our police reports available online on a weekly basis. I don't know if you pick up the post, you see they got like 4 or 5 of them different things every week that happen in Robbinsdale. Well, there are more than 4 or 5 police calls. I look out my window right now and I can see the police and fire station. So there are more than 4 or 5 in a week. What I'd like to, if we're more transparent that way, I think that would speak to the accountability for sure. And that would be, I don't know if necessarily that's a thing of policy. I suppose you could categorize it as that. But I think that the more transparent we are with what our police are doing, where they are, it would certainly help, in making them more accountable. And, look, I think it's a two-way street too. I think that if all the information is out there, it's kind of like body cams. If all the information is out there, then it should protect them to say, hey, these guys are doing a good job in this situation. How difficult is their job right now? Tough job right now. I think police officers will tell you that they're, it's a difficult job. But at the same time, I think that if we have our police reports available so that you can look on it in a given week and you can see that, there were X amount of police stops on West Broadway down by Dairy Queen. Okay, what's the problem, and who are they stopping, and why are they stopping? You know, I mean, and it gives you a better idea, and it makes them more accountable. You know, and maybe there was a problem, and maybe there was a lot of speeding going on. Maybe there was some drug activity that, you know, they were tipped off on, and so now we know more, and so now the more information that's out there, the better. I don't think secrecy in this is a good thing. And if you, again, I go back to that police forum that I listened to over a week ago. I think that they were pretty open about the fact that the more people understand what they're doing, the better off everybody is, and and it makes them more accountable, because now it's their job, you know. And so that I think best answers that as far as I can see. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Wally. Thanks, Nick, for that question. I do see a couple of other questions coming in, so I'll ask the next one from Jackie. Jackie asks, respectfully, are there specific things that you feel differentiate you from Bill Blonigan on the topics of inclusion and equity?
Well, and again, I don't want to sit here and throw Bill under the bus, but he's been there 40 years, and now is when he's first started talking about this. And I would, you know, it's not me to do this type of, to talk like this, because my campaign has been positive. I've just been talking about things that I would like to see, but I will say that you know, now all of a sudden it's important. This is who I am, as I told you a little bit earlier. I've been immersed in this, in the community and in the African American community, and, you know, bringing kids of color into our programs and in youth sports, whether it's basketball or baseball or whatever it has been, and beyond the borders. I mean, that's the difference. I mean, if you want to look at the record and then look forward, then look at the record and look forward, because who I am is who I'm going to be. And I've spoken specifically about things, you know, tonight that I think I could make a difference on. Just the people that I've dealt with in my business relationships, that are strong pillars in the African American community, I would lean on them. And I can't speak again for Bill and who he knows and what, you know, what type of relationships he has in that community, but I would lean on him. I can tell you right now, I will be on the phone with them when situations come up. A good friend of mine, African American gentleman who has endorsed me, Barry Rogers. He's lived in Robbinsdale for 25 years. I happen to coach his kid in baseball and basketball, and he is, you know, he's a strong proponent of mine. These are the type of people that I would lean on to give me, you know, ideas, give me, you know, just leads on which direction I should go. I'm not afraid to ask people questions. I'm a journalist by trade. I will ask questions. I can guarantee you that. I do not, believe me, I don't, although my wife and kids probably think that I think I know it all, I don't. And I'm not afraid to ask for help, and I will.
Great, thank you. I see another question from Holly. Thank you, Holly. Do you envision a way to tamp racism and bullying that is currently happening in our community?
You know, the bullying is a problem, and it crosses racial lines too. I don't even know if it's specifically just, well, I know it's not just specifically racial, and it's unfortunate. And you know, I just think that education and communicating with people and it doesn't just happen at the kids level. I'm seeing it running for mayor. And it bothers me. I've seen my wife yelled at by people. it's wrong. And tamp it down, I don't know. I think education is the best way to go. I'm sad that this type of thing is happening, but it is, unfortunately. And I know it happens to kids more often, and as adults, we can deal with it a little better, but it's been unfortunately been part of what I've been going through here. And it's fine. I mean, I'm getting through it, but I'm saddened by it, to be honest. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Thank you for that answer, and thank you, Holly, for the question as well. I just want to take a look at the group. I want to also be respectful of everyone's time. We're at about 1:45. Give me a wave if anyone else has a question here in the group. I want to acknowledge Jean's message. Thank you, Jean. Jean says, Wally, I'm sorry to hear that you and Don were targeted. And Holly also says, sorry to hear that, Wally. Some of us here are experiencing it too. Absolutely not okay. Oh, sorry, Aaron, I was reading your message. I'm with you, Wally. Bullying at that level is absolutely not okay. Yeah. So yes, members of this group are right there with you, Wally. Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate the sentiment.
So I don't see any other questions. I don't see any waving at the moment. So why don't I ask you, Wally, so if other questions do come up after our meeting today, and
sure,
those of us who want to, get in touch with you, maybe ask some further questions or continue this conversation, what would be the best way for us to reach out to you or get in touch?
Yeah, the best way is to email me, and it's wally@wallyformayor.com, FOR mayor, not the number 4. I'd be happy to answer your questions. I do have a Facebook page as well. So, feel free to, if you see topics on there, because I've done some different videos and that type of thing, talking about different topics of Robbinsdale. If you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to message me that way as well. I've gotten a number of questions from people via Facebook messaging, which is perfectly fine. Okay. I would hope that you would do that, and if as well, if it gets to a point where you would rather talk in person, we can message back and forth, or we can talk on the phone and we can exchange phone numbers at that point. So, but I would, email is probably the best way right now, and/or messaging, and then, if you prefer a phone conversation, then we can exchange phone numbers at that point. I'd be happy to talk.
That sounds great. For those in the group, I did put Wally. Wally, can you confirm that I typed that correctly in the chat? Wally@wallyformayor.com. It's the best way to reach you.
Yeah, I don't see it in the chat, but that is the correct.
Oh, okay. Not the number 4, correct? FOR.
Right. Yep.
For
right.
mayor. Okay.
Right.
I think I got it then.
Yep. Wally@Wally4FORmayor.com. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. So that's in the chat for the group. You can copy that if you want to get in touch with Wally. Jackie and Patty both send their thanks in the chat as well. Thanks for those messages. And yes, I want to thank you all for attending this evening, and thank you again, Mr. Langfellow, for meeting with us. I would like to thank the Robbinsdale for Racial Justice group for supporting this project through scheduling and formulating our questions. And I've said this before, but I think this group is going to be really great about getting out to vote. So I will use this opportunity again just to remind you to get those people in your life, contact them, reach out to them, and make sure that they are voting as well. So thank you. If you do need more info on voting by absentee, by mail, or drop off, you can go to hennepin.us/elections. So yes, thank you so much. Again, thanks for everyone. Thanks for being here this evening. Hope you have a great night.
All right, thanks, Mia.
Yeah, thank you, Wally.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.